Since so many of you guys answered yes that you would love to see an editing tutorial, I decided to give it a try and make my first one for y'all. So I'm going to start with this photo here. I picked this one because the lighting isn't exactly perfect. It was an overcast day, so we've kind of got some flat lighting on the fox. The ISO isn't really as low as I would have hoped it could have been. It's 1250, so the photo is a little bit grainier when you zoom in on those details. Um, so this is Hank. This is one of the foxes that I've gotten to know really well this summer. He lives up the road from me, and we've become really good buddies, along with his wife. The whole family's names are Hanky and Panky, are the parents, and then their babies are Wooly, Bully, and Smokey. You are probably just as familiar with them as I am now based on all the photos I post. But Hank's my favorite. He's the most charismatic of the group, definitely the boldest, willing to get close. I love this photo of him because there's a couple things going on here. We've got a really great expression. His eyes are looking up um, into the sky with a little bit of a sense of wonder. We've got a scar right here, which shows his wildness, and then his fur. This was taken at the beginning of the springtime when he was losing his winter coat. So his fur is really shaggy, and he looks quite feral. So I love it. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to crop the photo a little bit, just to balance out our empty space, this green background, with the space that he himself occupies. So maybe equal parts fox and greenery makes for a good composition in this case. It's really what your eye prefers, I think, on this kind of stuff. I'm not educated in photography, so I don't really know what the official rules are, but this is what looks best to me. So here's how we're going to crop it for now. The other thing that I do with my photos is I do tend to overexpose them when I'm taking them. I've learned the hard way that when you underexpose an image, it's really, really hard to lighten it again. A lot of the darks lose patches of information. There's not a lot of information in that dark patch there. So when you try to lighten it, it's just empty space. Whereas if you overexpose, there is still a lot of information in these whiter parts. So when you drop the exposure a little bit, you're not losing detail. You know, it actually became more detailed here because it's no longer oversaturated. So I dropped the exposure a little bit. Depending on how much I overexpose, I might even drop it a little bit more. For our purposes, I think I am going to keep it right around here. Now, even though I dropped the exposure, I still really liked those white highlights here. I think they provided a great contrast down here and in his fur. So let's see if pulling up the highlight slider and the white slider helps with that at all. And I think it does. I think it makes him pop up against that background a little bit more. The next thing I do is the most important part of the animal to me is their eyes. I think their eyes tell a story. I think um, the eye of an animal isn't really something that you get to see all that often. It's hard to make eye contact with a wild animal. It's sometimes a dangerous thing to do. So I like to make my photos show something that people might not necessarily see otherwise. So I'm going to really start working on that eye. So naturally, you'd want to select the eye by clicking on it, but that's actually not a good idea because when you use this brush slash microphone tool, I call it the microphone tool because that's what it looks like, it puts this selection dot over whatever you click on first, so then you can't see the eye, and how are you going to edit it if you can't see it? So what I usually do is I'll click like away, like over there, and then paint over his eyeball. So for this one, I think his eye is pretty dark, so let's pull up the exposure a tiny bit, make it pop a little bit more. Let's pull the clarity all the way up, really sharpen it up, and maybe pop up the saturation a little bit. We'll come back to that. Now the other weird thing that happened though is when I clicked over in this open space, it did pull up the saturation and exposure of that little spot I clicked on. So let's click on it again, go back down to where we adjust the size of the tool, hit erase, and we're gonna erase that splotch so we don't have any weird randomly edited points. So the next thing that I'll do on a photo like this, right now, if you've looked at my feed, I've kind of got this fall color aesthetic going on. I really am working on bringing out the warmer tones to match the change of the leaves and just that general autumn feeling that you get when you look at photos with a lot of reds and oranges. So let's do what we can to kind of dull these greens and bring out the warm colors on this picture. So I'm going to go down here to my color slider or HSL slider, I don't really know what it's actually called, and select on my green quadrant. Sometimes it like has all of them if you click on the HSL. No, that just gives you that. I don't know. I don't know what they do. I click on color, click on green, go over here. I'm going to turn my greens orange. See that? It wasn't a huge difference, but took the green from that down to a little bit warmer of a background. Now let's play around and see, do we want that background lighter by pulling up our luminance? No, I think it pulls in the grain. Maybe let's try and darken it. I think the darker is kind of cool so far. Makes the fox stand out a little bit more. Now let's play around with the oranges, because foxes do have, these orange spots, sections, patches, I don't know what you call them. And because this photo, the lighting wasn't very good, we did lose a lot of the color. So let's see if we can bring it back or make it a little bit cooler in our eyes. By pulling up the saturation, it definitely brought the orange up a little bit more. If we slide it down more toward the red area, we really give him that red fox intensity of color. Take him from a greenish yellow to a real true red. I don't like pulling the luminance up on this one. Makes him too bright. We lose a lot of the color. I think if we pull it just a little bit down to -10, that puts us in a really cool spot with the lighting and everything. So next I'll play with the oranges. The yellows. See if I can make them more orange. That might be a little too orange. Let's see. Pull up the saturation. I like that. It gives them a little bit of a sunset effect. Don't be afraid to really go kind of crazy with the colors when you're just editing. Pull them all the way down and see what it does. I don't hate that. It looks kind of unrealistic, but it's a cool effect. The more you play around, the more you're going to learn what you like and what you don't like. In this case, the fox in my head, this guy matches the fox that I have in my head for this type of photo. So I really like this color scheme here. Let's check and see. A lot of times with wildlife photography, the whites and the blacks of the animal can look a little bit bluish. So let's take this blue quadrant or color square and drop the saturation on our blues. Because foxes aren't blue. Let's be real. You've never seen a blue fox. If you have, I will give you $1 million if I can come photograph it with you. So I'm pulling that all the way down and keeping these white. I think that that's a really, really cool contrast. I don't know how you feel. If you like those blues, you can absolutely keep yours where you are. This is just my method. I'm going to crop him a little bit different now. Sometimes when you start to play with the colors, you realize a different way that you want to balance the composition out. So I'm constantly cropping and recropping my photos. Let's see how long this one actually sticks before I crop it again. So now that we've got the colors around where I like them, let's play with the temperature up here. This is definitely the tool to helping with your aesthetic. I think by pulling it up a little bit more, it's only up by 10 ticks more than it was, but it really brings out more of a fall color tone that I love. There's a random red spot right now. I'm going to see if I can do anything to make that stand out a little bit less. No, it doesn't look like my red color slider is reading it, so maybe I'll leave it. We'll see. We'll see how I feel once I'm done editing. I don't know what the difference is between the tone curve highlights, darks, and shadows as opposed to just the regular treatment highlights, shadows, darks, and blacks, but it definitely gives you some different effects when you start playing with these sliders down here. So let's pull up our darks. I don't like that. I know a lot of people with a lighter aesthetic might prefer that type of photo editing, so if that's your style, definitely brings up all of these different colors quite evenly. I'm going to try and drop it though, because I like contrast. I think that adds a lot of value to the picture. Now it almost looks like this fox is lit up in a ray of sunshine while the rest of the background fades into whateverness. Let's see if we can even play with these highlights a little bit more. Make them look a little bit more reflective or less reflective. I actually feel like pulling them down speaks to me a little bit more. Let's pull up the lights. I think pulling up the overall lights balances this quite nicely. We've got kind of like a bump effect going on our tone curve. I know a lot of people are like S-curve purists or, I don't know, a bunch of other random stuff that doesn't make any sense to me. So whatever looks best to you or whatever you think works, don't be afraid to break the rules that you've heard, because quite frankly, they don't always make sense. So funny, I just returned it right back how it was cropped originally, but I'm really, really liking what's going on here with this photo. I think that this has a great color balance. I think we've got a nice balance of open space to fox-filled space. maybe I'll adjust it a little bit more, see how much value pulling it even wider brings. And in some cases, if you've got a really, really rich background that shows you a lot about the animal's habitat, by all means, keep it wide, keep it pulled out. But in this case, there's not really much going on in the background. Really, all the background serves in this photo is to be a contrast to the fox himself. So keeping it closely cropped has some good effects here. Another thing that I do as well, and you can play around. I used to be really, really into split toning. So let's see, in this case, my highlights are a little bit red. Let's see, maybe we'll make the shadows blue to contrast that a bit. I don't know if I like the blues. Huh, I actually like that shadow effect. Maybe a little bit more understated. See if we can make it gold. Yeah, I like that. I don't know what I just did, but I like it. Let's see. Yeah, I think it contributes to the fall fulgence aesthetic that I'm aiming for here. I come down to this lens corrections box and do enable profile corrections. As long as you're shooting in RAW, it usually will read your metadata and be able to guess what kind of lens you're using. In my case, since this is on my hard drive, it's not really reading the metadata right now. I don't know why, because technology is scary and confusing. But this is a Tamarind lens, so I'm going to click that, and, well, it's reading it as a lens that it's not actually, so this isn't helping much. But sometimes if you have like a super wide angle, it'll just correct the proportions because it does get a little bit distorted. I know a lot of people hate vignetting. I really, really prefer it, especially for Instagram. So I'll slide that down a tiny bit. Keep the light focus on the fox here, and it dulls the edges a little tiny bit. I know so many people hate that, so to you folks, I'm sorry if I just did a giant photography no-no, but it's one of the things that I like a lot. Now I'm going to kind of spot edit a little bit. I think his nose is considerably darker than the rest of his body, so I'm going back to my brush tool. It just looks like a microphone. Come on. What else am I supposed to call it? Click on that. I'm adjusting the feather here so that this circle doesn't have as harsh of edges. And I'm going to select this part of the fox. And maybe, I don't know, play around with the light a little bit. Pull up the shadows. Yeah, go down around his eye. Pull up those shadows a little bit as well. Super duper minor change, but I like it. I might be getting a little carried away here, I don't know. I like it. Lighter fox, darker background. Another thing that I like to do as well, another part of the animal that really speaks to me along with its eyes, I love the animal's ears and these furry tendrils that stick out. So I'm going to do another different microphone tool, and I'm going to select just the ears here and here, and I'm going to really crank that clarity. Make them pop. Look at that. They look like teeth inside those ears because that is a beautiful part of the animal. The ears make me happy, so I'm going to make them pop. Now I'm going to do another microphone tool, and I want to try something down here. This fox definitely has this look of staring into a sunbeam, but I want to try and draw it out even more. So I'm going to make a tiny little sized selection here, kind of match this whiter part of the fox. And I'm going to paint over all this stuff. Get some of his furry tendrils, maybe. I might have to erase that, we'll see. Match the clarity. Maybe I can pull that up a little bit more. Yeah, like that. And I'm going to try and whiten it. Try and pull these highlights up and give them this kind of glowing effect. Make it look like those were really caught in the sunshine a little bit more than they actually were. In this case, I think that pulling up the highlights isn't affecting the background over much, so it's pretty good. Maybe let's see about giving it a sunset tint. This photo wasn't taken at sunset, but let's try and make it look like it was. Let's grab under here and along his mouth and contribute that sunset lighting to those areas. Let's even paint over his eye, make it look like we could see the sunset in his eye a little bit. No, that's too much. Now it's too orange. We're going to erase that. But we're going to keep it for the rest of these whites that we're painting over here. I like that. I think that adds a little bit of a story to the photo, although the story might not necessarily be true. Because I think I took this photo at like, I don't know, 4 o'clock in the afternoon when the sun wasn't setting until around 8:30ish. I think that when I pulled up the whites, it started to mess with the background a little bit back there. It looked a little bit less natural, so I'm going to drop the whites back down to where they were. Keep on playing with the highlights and the warmth. Maybe highlight more of this part of him. Give his snout that sunset lighting, maybe this part of him too, his ears. The sunset reflect off of his ears. And we're losing some of the whites that I love, but I think we're losing them for a good cause here. Yeah, I like what we've done here. I think this is cool. Let's see if the temperature... No, I think that becomes a little bit too orange, and if we wade into the blue territory. That's a great summer aesthetic, not really what I'm looking for these fall tones that I'm really trying to bring out. So I'm going to put it right back where it was. Now let's take a quick look at the before and after. Oh, let's see. There we go. Look at that. We really brought out some of the detail here in this guy's eyes, brought out a contrast between the white tips of the fur and brought out the oranges that truly are there. We just lost them in my poor light. Pull out a bit and we go from a early noon on a cloudy day effect to a fox at sunset type of photo. And let's look a little bit more at the details. I think we've done a pretty okay job on this one. One thing I always tell myself is no photo is ever finished. I am constantly going back and editing a picture more and more. Sometimes when I airdrop it from my computer to my phone, the colors look off again, so I have to go back and readjust them. But I think in this case, I'm happy with the results, so I think we're done. And that is the end of my first tutorial video. I hope it was helpful. Sorry, I don't know a lot of technical terminology and that I kind of ramble like a mindless doofus sometimes, but if you liked this, shoot me a message, let me know. I'm happy to make more for some harder lighting conditions, some flatter, harsher light tones. We can work on all different types of animals. I've got elk, I've got bighorn sheep, I've got moose, foxes, bears, and wolves. So whatever you guys want, shoot me a message, give me some feedback. Let me know what else you'd like to learn. Thanks for tuning in.